welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with Justine Eckert with Eckert and Associates.
Yes, that is correct.
And that's your company, obviously. It's named
Yes.
after you. Can you give me a little bit of a background? It's commercial insurance. How long have you been doing insurance?
So I have been doing insurance as a licensed agent for over 21 years. You can say I think you could say I know a thing or two about insurance, but I decided a couple years ago that I wanted to just focus on commercial. So I sold the insurance agency that I had, which was a Farmers Insurance, so that I could focus on just commercial for my clients.
So you had to get away from farmers in order to do that?
Yes, I did. So Farmers is what we call a captive insurance company. So that means that's the only company that I could be appointed with. And so if I have that appointment, other carriers also would not allow me to have an appointment with them to be able to write insurance.
So now that you have your own agency, you're a brokerage? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And
so
that you can go out there into the insurance world and write policies and get different, I don't know how your world
yes,
works.
it gives us access to get appointments with other carriers. So I do have multiple carriers that I use, and most of them specialize in certain industries where, I've got somebody specifically for my contractors, and I have someone that I really like for cybersecurity. And so those are some things that allow me to get the best product for my client and also the best price.
Okay, so you brought up cybersecurity. That's one of the things I
Yes.
really want to talk about here, because in the world of virtual assistant staffing, cybersecurity can be a concern. What are the big things in the cybersecurity world that, as far as insurance goes, that are causing issues for companies out there? What are like the big red flag areas?
A big part is data breach, where a company can come in and access your private information. But the leading cause of cybersecurity incidences or losses would be based on human error. That's actually a large part of it. So maybe they accidentally log into their social media account and they download something that they shouldn't have downloaded. You've just opened up that door for a cybersecurity risk and a threat as well. So you really don't want to encourage that. Now, you may have a company Facebook page or a company TikTok account where you're going to be sharing that stuff, but on a personal level, you definitely would not want to access that or give access to your employees on that work computer.
So let's start with the basic definition of cybersecurity insurance. What is it?
So cybersecurity insurance will protect you and your company against threats. So those threats could be anywhere from malware to ransomware to a cyber attack where they go in and they steal even your clients' confidential information and important information. And so this insurance will help protect under various different aspects. So they cover the initial response, right? Let's notify your customers that this happened. So typically that includes, you're calling, you're emailing, you're mailing, you're telling them that this threat has happened. There's the cost of the actual notification that is covered. They also will offer a credit monitoring service, typically for a year. All of this is part of that cost. Now there's also the other part, the forensic part, right? So all of this stuff costs money, right? But how do we prevent this from happening again? Or how do we learn more about the person that attacked you or the company that attacked you? And so the forensic side, the insurance company will have forensics where they're looking at, how did they gain access? Was there something that was weak? Was there something that had been compromised that we didn't know about? Is there an employee that shared that information with somebody else? So that's part of what it protects against. For ransomware, where they say, we've hijacked your files, your server, whatever it might be, your website, we want $25,000 to give you this back. And it's never a guarantee. It may be, you may have a better chance if you pay that money, but the insurance company will reimburse you if that has happened and you've paid out anything for that.
Oh, they will. That's interesting.
Yes, they will. Now, not all companies are created equally and not all plans are the same. So it is really important that you know what your policy includes, that you take the time to read the policy yourself and you have an agent that you can trust that they're giving you the proper protection.
What about lawsuits as well?
Lawsuits would also be covered. So there's also the third party risk, right? So let's say that I was an IT company and I have access to various doctors' offices or hospitals. If my client records are compromised, it's likely that their client records are also compromised. So if I just gave them access into a major hospital system and that hospital system has millions of patients that they've treated over the last 10 years, now I've just opened up that door to them. And that information has now been compromised because they trusted me as a vendor to protect that information. So that would cover the third-party lawsuit. So if I get sued by them, if their patient sues because of me and my mistake, then that would be something that we would want to make sure that the company is protected. And I say me as in if I was a business owner that owned that, we want to make sure that they're covered for that. So cyber insurance would also cover those things. Now, there's different levels depending on, okay, I'm just a retail shop and I have this. There's special coverages for an IT company or somebody who produces software. And then there's also some different coverages for those larger companies that have like a professional license, something like a financial advisor, an engineer or architect, those types of companies.
What about if somebody is going to hire a virtual assistant to work for them and cybersecurity may be a concern for them? Are there cybersecurity policies that cover that kind of situation? What does that look like?
Yes, a lot of companies already include a little bit of cyber protection. So usually we'll see if they offer data breach, they may offer $25,000. But when we're looking at an entire claim for cyber, we're talking about, even for a small incident, over $100,000 for that claim. That's the cost for the insurance company. So when we say, okay, we're going to get $1 million policy, it may sound extensive. It may sound, my company doesn't make that much, or we don't have that much in assets. When you add up the cost of the claim, we could be at several $100,000 even for a small claim. So back to your question about what kind of things we would need to do for those remote workers overseas, we would want to make sure that the policy would cover overseas, or that they work in a country that would be covered, because not all policies will extend beyond the United States. Okay, so they really have to know. So especially when it's an add-on to another policy, it's very basic. There's a lot of exclusions. It doesn't cover very much. Now, if they went out, this business owner went out and bought their own cyber policy, like I have carriers that will cover, one of them even words it as coverage provided across the universe. It's not just limited to just Texas or just the United States or just a list of specific countries. So that's pretty interesting, but also something that people wouldn't think to ask. Technology is growing so fast and access to people worldwide. So this is definitely important to know as they grow, people grow, and they want to have a virtual assistant. And you're thinking of, okay, how can I cut my costs as a business owner? Is there other outlets that I can use? We want to make sure that they have the right policy for that as well.
Are you aware if there's insurance policies on the cybersecurity side that cover virtual assistants out of the Philippines, for example?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And are they really expensive? Are they very affordable? Where do they usually fall?
So what's nice is that one of the carriers that we use actually does not charge a minimum premium, which is nice for the small business owners. So what minimum premium is, it's typically when a company says, okay, the smallest policy we're going to write is, for example, $1,000. Some carriers get into the $5,000 range for minimum premium. And so I do have a carrier that would actually not charge a minimum premium. So it will be based strictly on your exposure. And they also rate that as well with number of employees, how many are virtual, how many are in office, and then also the revenue that is expected for the next 12 months.
Well, and I would imagine how much data too, right? And what type of data, how sensitive, if it's HIPAA data
Yes,
or whatever.
exactly.
I would think that might influence the cost of the insurance. Would that be right?
Yes. And there's certain questions that they'll ask, like what you're doing for safeguards, like what kind of training are your employees getting to know about the risks? Are you keeping up with those? And surprisingly, a lot of the people that have the cyber policies, a lot of the companies don't know that what's out there, what's the latest thing, what are people doing? And AI has also taken cyber threats to a whole other level, because now with just a couple of words from somebody, there's software that can recreate your voice and say, hey, Mark, I'm really in a jam and I need you to transfer X amount. And you think that you're seeing this person on a video, you think that it's their voice, and it's not. And a safeguard that you could put in place, especially with larger companies, where it wouldn't be unusual for me to say, hey, we need to transfer $50,000 to this account for X, Y, and Z, where it's just done maybe by the assistant or the accounting department, where there's like a safe word, right? Where we know, okay, what's the password? And it's something that nobody would know, that it's not written down anywhere. It's not saved on your computer, right? But it's just something that we know is that special word to verify that this is who you are.
Uh, Are there any like unique challenges when it comes to underwriting these types of policies for remote workers out of country?
I would say the hardest part is getting them access to what they need, right? So if let's say that they don't have internet where they're at, it's just not available. So they have to go to a coffee shop and they're on Wi-Fi at the coffee shop. That's one of the riskiest places. The airport is another one. So we have to know that 100% of the time they are using a secure network. If they're using a network and they have brothers and sisters, okay, what are they doing on the network and how secure is their connection? So that's one of the bigger challenges.
Is that where a VPN would then be helpful? Because then you create that secure
Yes.
network. And then if you got end-to-end encryption for communication would be another layer. So let's talk about those layers and then the responsibility on the part of the person using a virtual assistant.
Mhm.
What are some minimum things they need to have in place in order to qualify to not only get the policy, maybe that's not stopper on getting the policy, but certainly when you file a claim, you guys are going to be looking at all of this stuff. Did you have a firewall? Did you have all of these things in place?
Yes.
So what are some of those components that a business owner needs to make sure that they have in place?
So that's a great question, Mark, because a lot of people don't know where to start. I think the first step would be if you're not the IT professional, right? This isn't your industry. Having somebody that you can count on, having a company that you can work with that knows your system, that knows what's in place, that does the upgrades when it's necessary, or if it's time to do an update because there's another 500,000 different types of malware that have been introduced to the internet. We need to know what those are. So that's preventative is going to be the biggest step of having the preventative measures in place. The other part is very simple. It's just making sure that there is a plan for what to do when you're onboarding a new employee or you're bringing on another vendor that may not have the same training as you. So we want to make sure that those are done properly and also that people are taking their time, right? They're not rushing. They're not going to say, okay, I'm going to go to lunch, but I'm going to be late to work. So let me log in from my cell phone or let me hop on Wi-Fi at the coffee shop. That they know that there's certain procedures that need to be followed and also certain safeguards that need to be in place. Beyond that, also the systems, the operating systems are going to be important. So a lot of times it's okay, I have Windows and they're using the home version. The professional version also offers different safeguards, such as encryption with BitLocker and certain things like that. We want to make sure that those are separated because if you're plugging in, if this is the computer that you use to get on Facebook or any kind of social media platform, and then you're using it for work, and maybe I have an external drive that's being plugged in. If that's the case, if there's something on that external drive, or I've used this at the airport when I was connected somewhere, or I used it at the hotel that I was at, you could potentially introduce risks from that external device into your computer that you're using for work. So I really do recommend having separate computers. So if you have a remote employee, there's different ways that you can make sure that they have some skin in the game too, right? That they're going to return your equipment and that sort of thing. But it's really best if you can send that to them being set up already with the proper security features and that sort of thing. And then your IT person could also remote in and check on the computer and do sorts of things like that to make sure that it is going to be safe for them to access your files and anything that could be confidential that would be a threat if that was released.
So I know you touched on this earlier, but let's go through like a response. So somebody gets a hold of you, let's say one of your clients that you sold a cybersecurity policy to, says they have to file a claim.
Yes.
Walk me through what that looks like on your side.
Yes. So we would want to find out if they've already notified customers at any point. They may have. So maybe they have something already in place. I do have carriers that would say, okay, even though you didn't use our form of notification, we're still going to reimburse you, or we may add that company to the list. Certain companies like large insurance companies, or when you're working as a financial advisor and you're with a company, they may have their own protocol or their own companies that they would like to use. So you may have to go through them first, just depending. If you're your own independent company and it doesn't matter, we would want to file a claim right away so that we can get that notification process started immediately. Also, shut down any computers that you have that are currently tied to the internet, and just don't use those until you can have somebody, an IT professional, go through there, scrub the files, see where access was gained. And the insurance company will also have a part to play in that because of the forensic side.
Yeah, so the forensics, that's a whole other layer of inconvenience on the part of the business owner as well.
Yes.
Because if they're having to stop what they're doing, how long is that process? Are we talking a couple days, a couple hours, a couple weeks? What is that?
It depends on what they've accessed. And also, let's say that was your website and you sell online products. You may be without for a while, especially if that was like a ransomware where they came in and they totally took over the website and you don't have access. So part of what the insurance company does is they also investigate the business income that was lost. And the cyber insurance policy can also pay for that business income to replace it. So you may not be, we want to make sure that you're whole again is really the whole point of that. Now, we can't replace the stress or the tears that you had or went through during this time, but we can help replace the business income that your company would have had this loss not happened.
I see. So even the continued loss, like even if it's not ransomware, right? If it's just some kind of data breach, the client information got stolen or whatever, that you guys need to figure out how that happened, where the weak point was, right? Mm-hmm. And then, but to do that, you got to be able to come in and take a look at everything.
Yes.
But during that time, we're not supposed to touch anything on the business side of it,
Correct.
right?
So that means probably no business for X amount of days.
Right.
Or weeks.
They'd be compensated for
yes, that is
as
correct.
well. Mm-hmm. But still, the inconvenience factor would be huge, right?
Yes.
Not really a pleasant experience. Have you been through a few of these in your experience?
So I personally have not had a claim for me, but I have had clients that have been exposed. We see a lot of threat on the healthcare side and also with any companies that work with financial stuff like investors, financial advisors or investors that handle money. There is always a risk for them. They're usually a higher target. So just because you don't fit in those categories doesn't mean that you can't be a target. There was also people also thought that your revenue had to be at a certain point for you to be at risk. That's gone out the window. There's no company that's too small or too big for somebody attempting to commit a crime that could come in and try to go after you.
Yeah, I would think e-commerce would be another one too. There's a lot of transactions going on that, especially on a ransomware type situation, seems like it'd be a good fit.
And in healthcare as well, because when there was that HIPAA requirement with all of the patient files having to be electronic, like there were so many years that the healthcare providers had to put their documents on electronic files instead of paper files. And that just made them an easier target because they have your social and they have your address and all your insurance information and your medical history. And so they have to take special safeguards to make sure that those files are protected.
Do they get special insurance for that as well?
The cyber insurance, if they have the right policy, will cover that. Most people don't call and just ask for cyber. It's something that is a growing threat, and we've seen a big spike since the early 2000s.
Oh, really? So it's been growing quite a bit.
Yes.
All right. Any advice for a small business owner that's looking to get a virtual assistant that is they're in that space where their data is sensitive, right? Mm-hmm. The client, they have Social Security numbers or some financial data or something like that. What would your advice be there? So I'm going like worst case scenario where it's like, hey, if a financial planner is going to come in or a financial planning company wants to hire a bunch of VAs to do stuff for them, what should they really be looking at to make sure that their stuff is protected on the insurance side?
Yes. So I think a big part of that is going to be training, right? Providing the right training, but also to make sure that you're doing the regular checkups. So if that's weekly or daily where you have a scan of all your systems, you know if there's been an access from a different IP address that isn't out, that's not the normal one. So if it's out of the norm and you say, hey, this is accessed from somewhere else other than what we have specified, look into that. And so I think part of it is that we get so busy and wrapped up in our day-to-day operations of business that the little things like IT security, we tend to push it off to, okay, I'll get to that next week, or, oh, that's a big expense for us to set up this new network. Don't go cheap when it comes to this stuff, because it's not just, we have the policy to help you recoup some of the money, but the time, the effort, the stress, the toll that it plays on your clients. And this could also potentially mean that you lose a large business deal.
Or your
with
reputation,
somebody.
big time.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's the big thing. I think you risk losing that reputation, which can take a long time to recover from. So really, like patch management, right? Your updates and stuff, make sure everything is good to go there. When it comes to the employee training and awareness side of it, I am curious about what that looks like.
Okay.
From your experience.
Yes. So letting them know what to be aware of. So if you get an email from somebody, and maybe it's somebody that you haven't heard from before, and they send you 10 large attachments. Okay, well, you should do a little bit more research on who is this person. Maybe you ask other people in your office. So if this is an assistant, they say, hey, this guy, Bob Smith, I haven't heard from him before, and he's sending me all these files, or he's asking me to send him XYZ. Is this somebody you're working with? I don't see him in our database. Do they list a phone number? Do they list an address? Is the wording the way we would normally talk, right? So in some of those emails that you'll get from the Nigerian prince, it's English, but it sounds like it's very rough, or they use terms that we don't normally use in everyday language. And so to be on guard and looking for that, and don't just quickly go to download the file, because that may be something that could pose a threat to your entire network for downloading that. So training them on what to look for, and just making sure that they're not always in a rush. Take your time, and don't be afraid to do a little bit of research if you need to do that.
And on the business owner side, we should be documenting that as well, right? That
yes.
So-and-so was trained on such and such time, whatever.
Yes. When was the last time they had an update? If there is, but also keeping up with the insurance, the cyber updates, like for new ransomware, new cyber attacks, new techniques, like the video where they could recreate your voice and also your image. That's through AI. And that wasn't a thing a few years ago. But now that technology has advanced so far, some people unfortunately are using that in a bad way, where they could easily get access to your system, and even you're thinking that you're talking to one of your business partners or to a client. So this is really important to just be aware of what's out there. And so there's different, like some of the carriers have newsletters that you can sign up for, and you can read weekly about what are some of the new threats that are out there. Do we need to upgrade our systems? Is it time for that? So just being a step ahead.
I think having a third-party IT management system that can help you stay up to date on all that seems like a good use of money.
Yes,
for a business, because it's just another job that a small business owner is going to have.
Yes,
to stay on top of all this, best just to hire somebody.
Yeah.
But the cost associated with that is where as I'm navigating this cybersecurity side of virtual assistant staffing, cost is always a thing. So figuring out what that would be, if it's reasonable, if you can't put a dollar amount to it, is it reasonable for somebody to be able to do that to protect themselves?
Yeah. And there's some IT companies that will say, okay, maybe you're not large enough yet to have an IT person on staff, but maybe you'll sign up for having 5 hours a month of access to tech support, or less or more, just depending on what your needs are. It may just be, okay, we need somebody for this large project, and then after that, we just need maintenance. So there are options out there. A lot of people get scared because it sounds expensive, especially when it's something that you're not very familiar with. We're scared to ask, how much is that going to cost me, or what's the price? But there are companies out there that are reputable that can offer something that's appropriate for their business size.
Love it. Anything we missed that you think that we should touch on before we wrap up?
Oh, that's a great question. There's so much that is involved in commercial insurance in general, but finding out what your policy includes and what are the exclusions. So you may have some coverage already, but it's important to know what you have and if it applies to your virtual assistants if you have one. So I wouldn't just take your agent's word for it. Read through the policies yourself and see what information is listed. If there are exclusions that are listed for having staff outside of the office, because some carriers don't like it when your staff is not here in person, even when it comes to errors and omissions policies. So it's good to know that you have the right coverage. Most of the more extensive coverages that you would need that cover a lot of the things that we talked about are going to be a separate standalone cyber policy. And so that's what's going to be important, to have that coverage to make sure that you're protected against all of the threats that are out there.
So I picked up two things for sure there. One was your general insurance policy. You should make sure that you're good if you have a virtual assistant from overseas. And the other part is the cybersecurity, making sure that you're clear on that for what your business needs are.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. And I imagine you would be a good person for them to talk to
Yes,
about that,
I would be
right?
happy to talk to them, especially since we only focus on commercial insurance. We're well versed when it comes to cyber insurance.
Love it. And if folks want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
The best way is actually to call my office at 210-693-0046 or send us an email at Justine at EckertINSagency.com. So that's Eckert, ECKERT, INSagency.com.
Love it. Thank you, Justine, for coming in and chatting
Thank
with me
you so
about
much,
it.
Mark.
It's a lot of fun.
I appreciate you having me on the show.
All right, to wrap up, a quick reminder, check out our latest podcast and catch video version of the show anytime by visiting my website at Crukus.com. That's Crukus.com. That's going to be it for this one. Thanks, guys, and have a great week.
Thank you.